So we go from Stanley's facetious sarcasm to Lulu's questions. Why don't you have a wash? You look terrible. And then Stanley says a wash wouldn't make any difference, and this just strikes me as being obviously a sign of his apathy, but also a very obvious um, point of potential comparison with Blanche. You know, he here obviously turns down the opportunity to cleanse himself, so to speak, because he does not in any way value kind of his identity in social terms. He doesn't see himself as sort of social being almost. But Blanche obviously sees this sort of cleansing purely because she, it is to do with her social identity, the way she projects herself and wanting to look well presented all the time. But really, it's a sort of act of absolution, of cleansing almost. So, um, yeah, this is an important, I think, a possible point of comparison. And she says, come out and get a bit of air. You depress me looking like that. Air? Oh, I don't know about that. There's a huge amount of, it's facetious as well in the lines that are above. He's deliberately being kind of childish here and sarcastic. But there is a kind of grim irony to this, that he almost can't even be bothered to breathe for himself. And I think that inertia is being heavily emphasized in this particular dialogue. And then we have this bizarre flirtation around the cheese sandwiches. And Lulu offers him the sandwiches, and Stanley here is extremely defensive of his isolation. I think he says I'm a big eater, so it's almost a defensive anticipation of Lulu's offer and a way of preventing herself from having to prevent himself from needing to engage with this offer to be even slightly adventurous. I mean, but you end up talking in these terms about something very mundane. Going and eating a cheese sandwich with a girl becomes the expression of a sense of adventure. But of course, the comedy part of Pinter's comedy of menace is that's of course pathetic and slightly ridiculous to see a cheese sandwich as a sign of adventure. So Lulu then says, "That's all right. I'm not hungry." And I think that her sacrifice here, I think, mirrors the sacrifices that both Blanche and Mitch are willing to make to each other initially in their relationship before Stanley Kowalski ends up ruining it for them. And there's a sense of sacrifice on her part that we don't see really in Stanley here. His defensiveness and his isolation is important. And because of that, he abruptly responds. He knows that she's made a point of self-sacrifice, and he sees that. He is wise to other people's moral virtues. That is his strength of a character, but changes tack because he senses a type of intimacy that he's going to find difficult to defend himself against. And that's where he reverses the questions then. How would you like to go away with me? He uses her language of a friendly approach against her, and then turns it into this utterly absurd defeatist exchange on the emptiness and the pointlessness of existence itself, where nowhere still we could go. And this aimlessness, I think, shows us that it's an empty solution. An empty solution, I think, almost like the Blanche-Mitch relationship. There's an empty hollowness of purpose in the suggestions of their kind of courting here. And then Stanley explicitly articulates this, and there's nowhere to go, so we could just go. The absence of purpose is sort of contingent upon there not being anywhere to go. And that is completely illogical, but at the same time seems to tell us something about Stanley's condition, Stanley's mental condition. There's sort of the absence of purpose provides a sense of possibility. But also I think you see here, importantly, a dislocation from him and his environment, like Blanche in Elysian Fields. There's a sense of almost dislocation from the concept of place itself. He associates place with conformity and with social rigidity. So Lulu in the end gets frustrated with him and says, well, that's a charming proposal. Do you have to wear those glasses? And now this is important because this is, I think, as closest to a proper symbol that we get from Pinter in the play. the glasses and the drum, I think, are the two standout examples. But the glasses, I think, are a symbol of Stanley's actual ability, Stanley's vision, but Stanley's vision in terms of social morality and ethics. He sees in society its naked truth about power and the moral value of individuals, but he's absolutely unable to see the same sorts of things in himself, and that's one of his central flaws as a character. So when he firmly answers yes, it is because it's his only positive trait, and I think that is the only thing that he is aware of that's positive about himself. And she says, so Lulu says, so you're not coming out for a walk? And Stanley says, I can't at the moment. This hedging language is obviously, first of all, dishonest. He completely could in practical terms. But I think there's a sort of sense of determined gloom about him here. There's a sense of determined unhappiness that naturally segues into the entry of McCann and Gberg, which is where we will move on to.